What if there is a nuclear explosion? Worst case scenario.
11 Action News at 11 with Fort Atkinson.
A lot of people did not know what was there until that one blew up in Damascus.
Good morning. There is now an official statement from Air Force Secretary Hansmark on the cause of the leak at the Titan II missile site near Damascus.
Men have multiple fractures and burns. One of the men listed in critical condition is...
Residents in the immediate area were evacuated in what was referred to as a precautionary measure.
People that worked the Titan program, that was a real strenuous, had to be dedicated to that job.
The first question is, why me? Why I got out and nobody else did?
It was early afternoon when it happened, but nightfall before rescuers could enter the 146-foot hole.
And anytime you have human beings that are working in environments that are highly technological and complex, mistakes will be made.
Human error, yeah, and we're all human.
About 10 miles north of Searcy, there's a small memorial on the side of the road. You could really easily miss it. And if you stop to read the inscription, it may seem like it's in the wrong place. But this overgrown field behind gates and barbed wire is the site of the most deadly accident ever in a U.S. nuclear weapons facility. And most people in town don't even know it happened. Or about the second accident that happened 15 years later. But there's still those that do remember every detail. Here's Carter Thweet.
And you are, I believe, the only living survivor of the 1965 missile silo fire.
I think that's correct.
Gary Lay is 77 now, a retired advertising executive living in Little Rock. But in 1965, he was 17, begging his dad to let him take a summer job.
A couple weeks before we were scheduled to go to school, he said, okay, I'm going to let you go back to work on the bases.
To understand exactly where Gary was working, I met with Gage Fears, a member of the White County Historical Society.
Around 1957, 1958, Russia had perfected their nuclear missile. So America had to play catch up, and we were granted 18 silos.
We being the state of Arkansas, one of 4 states that was picked for the Titan II program. The underground silos held the new missile, which would be launched in the event of war.
The Titan II, huge, powerful, and potentially hazardous.
The site itself was like a big city underground. Had 8 different levels, the missile surrounded by a covering, and then there was work going on all the levels.
One of Arkansas's 18 silos was number 4, located 10 miles north of Searcy.
August 6th, I go to Jacksonville, get all my papers and all that, and then I went to work on Site 4 Monday morning, August the 9th, and the accident happened Monday afternoon.
So this was your first day at that site?
Exactly.
Wow. Heck of a first day.
Yeah, it was. We came out for lunch. We started back down at 1 o'clock. All of a sudden, a huge ball of fire blazed up. It was not an explosion, but it was a ball of fire. And when it happened, the lights went out. Now you can imagine how dark it is 80 feet below the ground with no lights. And so I got on the escape ladder, and then I know God said, I got something that you probably need to do. And so I started back up that ladder. And there were guys that I were talking to that were falling all over the top of me, trying to get down the ladder in the dark, that I was able to get back to where we were. And I started feeling my way around that gun barrel in the dark. And I fell in that hot debris where that fire had blazed up. I collapsed in the cableway from the smoke. And they were in the control center, the air people, and they saw me and they picked me up and brought me into the control center and threw me in the decontamination shower. And then we got in the ambulance and went to Porter Rogers Hospital in Searcy.
U.S. congressional delegation toured the site and paid a visit to the 2 survivors at Searcy's Rogers Hospital. 18-year-old Gary Wayne Lay of Clinton was one of the survivors. 59-year-old paint foreman Hubert Saunders of Conway the other. Saunders described the silo as the darkest place in the world after the lights went out.
Yeah, you in the hospital.
Yeah, and that was my mom and dad. And there were only 2 of us that came in. And I was the one that was burned and so forth. So they were screwing around because they didn't know what they had coming. And unfortunately, no other survivors in that silo.
Gary suffered second and third degree burns and was in the hospital for 21 days. Yet, all things considered, he says he was one of the lucky ones.
53 men are dead, 53 men that woke up that morning and kissed their wives goodbye, patted their children on the head and went to work and never came home.
Pictures show workers' family members waiting at the site, hoping for good news that would never come. Over the years, few people have spoken with more of those family members than Jason Ulsberger.
I am a professor of sociology at Arkansas Tech University. My grandfather actually passed away in this incident. For people who've had family members who've passed away in incidents like this, it becomes more than just like a historical footnote. I think it becomes part of who they are.
The victims were all civilians, mostly pipe fitters, carpenters, electricians, and common laborers who lived in nearby towns like Searcy, Bald Knob, Judsonia, and Heber Springs.
There are no adequate words to express my own personal regret, nor the regret on the behalf of the officials of the state and the people of the state for this tragedy that has occurred.
This incident was tragic in and of itself, but I think it also contaminated family relationships. Even to this day, 60 years later, there's still a lot of hard feelings amongst family members that relate to this incident and the consequences that are associated with it.
That's what Jason Ulsberger wanted to get across in his book called The 53, Rituals, Grief, and a Titan II Missile Disaster. That this event happened, it affected real people, and it continues to do so.
Some of these family members received financial settlements from this. A lot of these were impoverished families, so I'm not sure that these wives who were left behind knew how to adequately manage those finances. Sometimes they were directed towards some siblings more than others. These family members matter, and their voices matter, and that's one thing that I think gets lost in the mix. The silo and the work there is important. The controversy, which some people believe that there's controversy revolving around how the incident started, that's important. But what's lost, I think, is the now 60 years of family members living in the shadow of grief.
That controversy Ulsberger mentions is something Fears is well aware of.
What the investigation report says was the main cause for the incident was an arc welder struck a hydraulic hose, and that hydraulic hose was highly pressurized, atomized the hydraulic fluid, and a flash fire occurred.
Gary is skeptical to this day, saying he didn't see anyone welding and doubts that explanation.
I was there, and I'd been around welding all my life from my dad. I know what welding is.
I don't think this incident lays on the shoulder of just one person, one welder.
But Gary doesn't think much about what caused the fire anymore, and over time, other feelings start to fade.
For the first 2 or 3 years, the first question is, why me? Not why me did this happen, why I got out and nobody else did.
Over the years, one purpose he's found is, like Ulsberger, speaking with the families of those impacted in the incident. And sometimes he gets an unexpected reminder of just how far he's come.
We were at the White County Historical Society. They had called because that was the 55-year anniversary. And a lady and her husband woke up to thank you for sharing, and she said, "Can I see your hands?" And I thought, "No, really? You want to see my hands?" So I held my hands out, and she was feeling of my hands. And she said, "I was the nurse working in the emergency room when they brought you in, and I thought you would never use your hands again." And so we hugged each other, we cried.
There are other lessons to take from the incident. Ulsberger thinks it could say something about our modern society.
I mean, 1965, we were just starting off to being on the verge of having our organization saturated with high-level technology, complex work practices, and that's done nothing but gotten a little more intense since 1965. And anytime you have human beings that are working in environments that are highly technological and complex, mistakes will be made.
Gary's takeaways are a bit more personal.
I mean, I think you need to laugh. I think you need to pray. I think you need to help. But just live every day the fullest, because we don't know.
In Searcy, Carter Thweet, THV 11 News.
In the Ozark foothills of Van Buren County lies Damascus. With more hay bales than people, the small town of less than 400 is a small blip on Highway 65, but 45 years ago, it was nearly home to the biggest disaster in U.S. history.
Good morning. There is now an official statement from Air Force Secretary Hans Mark on the cause of the leak at the Titan II missile site near Damascus that eventually led to an explosion around 3 o'clock this morning. According to the Air Force, a maintenance worker dropped a 3-pound wrench that punctured the missile.
There's been a bad accident, and there's going to be an explosion. This is the worst case scenario we talked to you about. It is happening tonight.
In the summer of 1979, Skip Rutherford was the administrative assistant and director of the Arkansas office for Senator David Pryor when he was contacted by U.S. airmen in civilian clothes with a dire warning.
What was happening at each of these missile sites, safety violations, worker fatigue, lack of equipment, no high priority. It was just simply a negotiating tool that was disintegrating before our very eyes.
Rutherford informed Senator Pryor, who began communicating with the Air Force over the next year about warnings for the public should an emergency happen. Little did the people of Arkansas know that a possible catastrophe was imminent.
Senator Pryor and Senator Bob Dole of Kansas introduced legislation, and others did, to provide sirens at each of the 54 missile sites. That legislation passed the Senate on September the 16th, 1980.
Wow.
2 days before.
That week in nearby Clinton, local radio reporter Sid King of KGFL was enjoying dinner with friends when he got a phone call from his co-worker at the station.
There's some activity going on the police scanner. He said apparently they've got another leak.
Sid was one of the first to arrive at the silo, along with Van Buren County authorities. Before too long, every media outlet was descending upon Damascus.
Here comes the other stations, and here comes the AP, and here comes newspaper. Pretty soon we had probably 15, 20 people standing out there.
Noise about a leak grew louder, but the seriousness of the situation remained silent.
Did they say why they were evacuating?
Well, if we had a fire and a leak.
Did they say whether there was any danger?
No. So the sheriff said they wouldn't tell them nothing.
Then, in the early morning hours of September 19th, speculation became a spectacle.
After 3 a.m., it happened. Flames shot into the air hundreds of feet. Then a huge glowing orange cloud formed.
I saw the air turn white because the air, it sucked the air toward it, and then it went kabloom.
And about 3:30, I get this call, and they said it just exploded. And I looked outside and I looked around. And I thought, I'm not disintegrated here. But I said, okay, well, what do we know? And he said, well, we know the warhead didn't explode. We know people are hurt. We don't know how many have died. It's a disaster. There's concrete everywhere.
And I have never seen nothing or heard nothing like that before in my life. You know, of course, this is had the propellant to carry that thing to Russia, you know. And so, I mean, a hell of an explosion.
And that missile, the warhead, which didn't explode, thank God, ended up about 100 feet away from the explosion site in a ditch.
In the aftermath, multiple servicemen were injured, with one fatality, Sergeant David Livingston.
3 of the men considered most seriously injured were brought from the Air Force Base here in Little Rock to the Baptist Med Center.
You know, it was an accident. You know, the dropped wrench was the cause of it and all that. It was obsolete equipment, you know. And so we needed to move on. And so then they started shutting them down.
Give credit to these young airmen who talked to us. They called this. They saw this. They knew this was coming. They tried to tell us.
45 years later, chaos traded for cow pastures, and the thought of how different Arkansas would look had that warhead exploded.
Human error.
Human error, yeah, and we're all human.
There are a couple reasons the lives lost in the Searcy missile silos seem to be forgotten. That's the way it is from generation to generation. Certain details get lost. Another reason is just how scary that time was, when nuclear bombs and rockets made everywhere a potential front line.
I think most everybody knew that something was there because they knew it was some kind of military operation, because we drove out there back and forth in military vehicles. A lot of people did not know what was there until that one blew up in Damascus.
Jack Meadows retired from the Air Force 2 years before the Searcy fire. That's him in the photo, in that silo, now displayed at the Jacksonville Museum of Military History. It's from a time when Americans felt the menace of the Soviet Union, but might not have known how close they were to the menace of our own Cold War weapons. They called you combat
crews.
Combat crews. Did it feel like combat?
When I first went on the crew, you had to stop and think, we're babysitting a Titan II intercontinental ballistic missile with horrible firepower. At first, it was scary. Then it got pretty routine.
Routine, yes, but always life and death for the military and civilian personnel descending every day.
The Titan was dangerous. The missile fuels, if you got one whiff of those fuels on the Titan, you were dead. They had to wear special uniforms, special clothing to work on those missiles. And the slightest little accident could, like dropping a big socket wrench, is what caused that thing to blow up. You could not be careless around a Titan II.
The Searcy and Damascus accidents represent an ironic and unfortunate distinction. They're the only two major accidents in the history of the Titan program. Both happened in Arkansas, both involving the same exact missile. The Air Force still uses ICBMs in its so-called security triad, weapons in subs, weapons on bombers, and some weapons still in silos. But the missile silos are all in secure military bases, and the Minuteman rockets used today have a 55-year safety record.
They're not quite about the same range, maybe a little less range than the Titan, but they're a lot more safe vehicle to work on. Ours was terribly dangerous to work on or even be around, as the missile explosion is a good example of that.
Meadows may be well removed from his days as a steely-eyed missile man, but we asked the Air Force, and they said he's right. The brass at the Global Strike Command at Louisiana's Barksdale Air Force Base speak proudly about the Minuteman III's program safety, security, and reliability. The Air Force also brags on the men and women in the service today for keeping today's missiles safe and secure. They say the Arkansas accidents are part of their safety curriculum. So at least institutionally, the men who died on Arkansas's Cold War front lines are still remembered, with at least one 89-year-old veteran making sure that continues.
You had a lot of personal pride, a lot of dedication. People that worked the Titan program, that was a real strenuous, had to be dedicated to that job.
The Titan II, huge, powerful, and potentially hazardous.